My name is Chris Davidson, I'm 34 years old, and 4 months ago my business partner of 6 years walked up to me at my father's funeral, put his hand on my shoulder like he was offering condolences, and quietly slid me an envelope containing buyout papers for our company. The papers gave me 30 days to accept his offer of $250,000 for my 50% stake in a business we'd built together that was worth at least $4 million, and the timing was clearly calculated to catch me at my most vulnerable and distracted. What Marcus didn't know was that my father had spent his last 3 months alive helping me prepare for exactly this kind of betrayal, and that the 30 days he gave me to accept his lowball offer would actually be 30 days of me systematically dismantling everything he built while stealing from me. If you want to hear how I turned my business partner's funeral ambush into his complete professional destruction in exactly 1 month, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications right now. This is Man's Diary, where we share real stories about business betrayals, strategic revenge, and winning when someone tries to screw you over. Trust me, this gets intense. Let me give you the full context because the betrayal goes deeper than just the funeral moment. My business partner Marcus Chen and I started our digital marketing agency in 2019 when we were both 28 years old. We'd worked together at a bigger agency, became friends, and decided to start our own company offering social media management, content creation, and digital advertising services to small and medium businesses. We called it Apex Digital Marketing. We each put in $25,000 as starting capital, we split ownership 50-50, and for the first few years everything was genuinely good between us. I handled the creative side, content strategy, client relationships, and campaign execution, while Marcus handled operations, finances, sales, and business development. We were a solid team with complementary skills, and the business grew steadily. By 2023, we had 12 employees, about 40 regular clients, and we were doing approximately $2 million in annual revenue with healthy profit margins. We were both pulling salaries of around $90,000 a year plus profit distributions, and we built something we were proud of. I thought Marcus was not just my business partner but genuinely one of my closest friends, someone I trusted completely with both the business and my personal life. My father Robert Davidson was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in August 2024, and it was devastating for me and my family. My dad was only 62 years old, had always been healthy and active, and suddenly we were being told he had maybe 6 months to live. My dad had been a corporate attorney for 35 years, he was sharp and experienced with business dealings, and even while dealing with his own mortality he was concerned about me and my business. In September, about a month after his diagnosis, my dad asked me to sit down with him and go through all my business documents, partnership agreements, financial statements, everything related to Apex Digital. We spent an entire afternoon in his home office reviewing everything, and my dad's expression got more and more concerned as he read through our partnership agreement and looked at the financial records. Finally he said something that I initially dismissed but would later realize was absolutely prophetic. "Chris, this partnership agreement is heavily weighted in Marcus's favor if there's ever a dispute or buyout situation. Did you have a lawyer review this before you signed it?" I admitted I hadn't. We'd used a template we found online and just filled in the blanks, and my dad shook his head. "Son, Marcus has a lot more control here than you realize, and if he wanted to push you out, he could do it pretty easily under these terms. I'm not saying he would, but you need to be aware of the vulnerability." My dad and I spent the next 2 weeks working together to document everything about the business that I could prove I'd personally created or managed. We compiled evidence of client relationships I'd built, campaigns I'd designed, revenue I'd generated, intellectual property I'd developed. My dad's advice was simple: hope for the best with Marcus but prepare for the worst. If he ever tries to screw you, you need to have documentation proving your value and your contributions that goes beyond what the partnership agreement says. I followed his advice and created a comprehensive file of everything I'd done for the company over 6 years, though I still didn't really believe Marcus would betray me. By October, my dad's condition had deteriorated rapidly and he was in hospice care at home. I was splitting my time between being with my family and trying to keep up with work, which meant I was distracted and not paying as much attention to the business as I normally would. Marcus seemed understanding and supportive, told me to take whatever time I needed with my dad, said he'd handle things at the office. I was grateful for his support and didn't question it, didn't notice that he was having private meetings with clients I'd brought in, didn't realize he was positioning himself as the sole key person in the company. My father passed away on November 3, 2024. It was peaceful, surrounded by family, but it destroyed me emotionally. I'd lost my dad, my mentor, one of my best friends. The funeral was scheduled for November 7th, and I spent those 4 days in a grief fog, barely functioning, just trying to get through each day and help my mom handle all the arrangements and paperwork that comes with someone's death. I wasn't thinking about business at all, wasn't checking emails or taking calls. I was just focused on my family and getting through the funeral. The funeral was on a gray, cold morning in Chicago where I grew up. About 200 people came to pay respects to my dad, colleagues from his law firm, family, friends, relatives, and people whose lives he'd impacted over the years. Marcus showed up about halfway through the service, which I appreciated because it showed support. After the service, during the reception at my parents' house, Marcus approached me and gave me a hug. "I'm so sorry for your loss, man," he said. "Your dad was a great guy. Listen, I know this isn't the time, but I need to talk to you about something business-related when you have a minute." I figured it was probably some urgent client issue or a decision that needed to be made, so I said sure, and we stepped into my dad's home office, the same room where my dad and I had reviewed all the business documents 2 months earlier. Marcus closed the door and pulled an envelope out of his jacket pocket. "Chris, I've been thinking a lot about the future of the company," he said. "You've been gone for weeks dealing with your dad's illness, which is completely understandable, but it's made me realize that the business needs someone who can be fully committed and present. I think it's best if I buy out your share of the company so you can focus on your family and I can focus on growing the business without worrying about partnership complications." He handed me the envelope, and inside were formal buyout papers offering me $250,000 for my 50% stake in Apex Digital Marketing. I just stared at the papers, my brain barely processing what was happening. "Marcus, what the hell is this?" I asked. "This is lowball as fuck. The company's worth way more than $500,000 total." Marcus had his response ready, delivered in this calm, reasonable tone that made it sound like he was doing me a favor. "Chris, the company's worth what someone will pay for it, and I'm offering you $250,000 right now, cash, no hassle. If you force a third-party valuation and sale process, it'll take months and cost tens of thousands in legal and accounting fees, and you might not end up with much more than I'm offering anyway. This way is clean and fast." The papers stipulated I had 30 days to accept the offer, and if I didn't accept, Marcus would invoke a clause in our partnership agreement that allowed either partner to force a company valuation and buyout process if there was an irreconcilable partnership dispute. Looking at the papers in my dad's office during his funeral reception, I felt this surge of rage that temporarily cut through my grief. Marcus had waited until the most vulnerable moment of my life, when I was exhausted and grieving and not thinking clearly, to ambush me with a buyout offer that would steal millions of dollars from me. This wasn't a friend. This was a predator who'd been planning this move and timing it for maximum advantage. I looked at Marcus and said very calmly, "I need time to think about this and talk to a lawyer. I'll give you an answer before the 30 days are up." Marcus seemed satisfied with that response, probably thinking I'd be too overwhelmed to fight it and would just accept his offer to avoid conflict. He patted me on the shoulder again, said, "Take your time, no rush," and left the reception. I sat in my dad's office holding those papers, and I heard my dad's voice in my head from 2 months earlier. "If he ever tries to screw you, you need to have documentation proving your value." That night after the funeral, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Marcus's betrayal, about how he'd calculated this move, about how he'd been positioning himself while I was distracted with my dying father. And then I remembered something else my dad had said: "In business, the person who controls the client relationships controls the company." I realized that Marcus had been smart about his plan, but he'd also made a critical assumption that I was too weak or too stupid or too grief-stricken to fight back effectively. He was wrong. The next morning, November 8th, I called the best business attorney in Chicago that I could find on short notice, a woman named Jennifer Park who specialized in partnership disputes and business valuations. I showed her the buyout papers Marcus had given me and explained the situation. Jennifer read through everything and her assessment was blunt. "This is an extremely lowball offer designed to take advantage of your vulnerable state. Based on the revenue numbers you've described, your company is worth at least $3 to $4 million, which means your 50% is worth $1.5 to $2 million. He's offering you $250, which is literally stealing over $1 million from you. Can I fight this?" I asked. "Absolutely," Jennifer said. "But here's the thing, if you fight it directly through the partnership agreement dispute process, it'll take months, cost a lot in legal fees, and the outcome isn't guaranteed because your partnership agreement does give him some structural advantages. However, if you want to really protect yourself and maximize your leverage, we should take a different approach. Instead of fighting him on his terms, we should spend the next 30 days building an independent case for why you're the more valuable partner and making it impossible for him to run the company without you." Jennifer and I spent the next week developing a comprehensive strategy. The plan had multiple components, but the core idea was simple. Over the next 30 days I would document and prove that I was the essential person in Apex digital marketing, that most of the client relationships were actually my relationships, that the revenue was driven by my work, and that Marcus couldn't run the company successfully without me. If I could prove that, then either Marcus would have to significantly increase his buyout offer, or I could make the argument that he should sell his stake to me instead. Phase 1 of the plan was documentation and evidence gathering. I went through 6 years of emails, project files, client communications, and company records to document exactly which clients I'd brought in, which campaigns I'd created, and which revenue I'd generated. It turned out that of our 40 regular clients, I had personally brought in 32 of them through my networking, my creative work, or my reputation in the industry. Those 32 clients represented approximately 75% of our annual revenue. Marcus had brought in 8 clients, mostly through cold outreach and sales tactics, and those 8 represented about 25% of revenue. I also documented that I'd personally created all of our core service methodologies, our content frameworks, our campaign templates, basically all the intellectual property that made our service delivery scalable and valuable. Marcus had handled operations and finances, which was important, but it was replaceable. A good operations manager could do what Marcus did, but our clients worked with us specifically because of the creative strategy and execution I provided. I compiled all of this evidence into a detailed report that Jennifer helped me format for legal purposes. Phase 2 was quiet relationship reinforcement with key clients. I reached out personally to the 32 clients I'd brought in, not saying anything about the partnership dispute, just reconnecting after my absence and making sure they knew I was back and available. I scheduled calls and meetings, asked about their businesses, provided strategic advice, reminded them why they worked with Apex in the first place. Several clients told me they'd been worried during my absence because Marcus didn't understand their businesses or strategies as well as I did. I took notes on all of those conversations because they supported my argument about being the essential partner. Phase 3 was the most aggressive and the part I'm least proud of, but absolutely necessary. I started preparing to leave and take clients with me. Jennifer helped me set up a new company called Davidson Creative Group, which would offer identical services to what Apex offered but would be solely owned by me. We filed all the paperwork, set up the bank accounts, built a basic website, but we didn't launch or tell anyone about it yet. This was my nuclear option. If Marcus forced a buyout at his lowball price, I'd leave Apex and take most of the clients with me, leaving him with a shell of a company that couldn't generate revenue without my creative work and client relationships. By November 25th, about 3 weeks into the 30-day deadline Marcus had given me, I had everything prepared. I had legal documentation proving I was the more valuable partner, I had client testimonials and communications proving the relationships were mine, I had a new company ready to launch if needed, and I had leverage. Jennifer advised me that we should let Marcus believe I was considering his offer, let him think the plan was working, and then hit him with everything on day 29 when he thought he was about to win. During those 3 weeks, I played the part of the grieving business partner who was considering the buyout. I showed up at the office, I was quiet and subdued, I let Marcus handle things and make decisions. Marcus seemed increasingly confident that I'd accept his offer. He even started making changes to the business like he already owned it fully, talking about his vision for the company's future and making plans that excluded me. It was infuriating to watch, but I knew I needed to let him feel secure so he wouldn't see my countermove coming. On December 5th, day 28 of the 30-day deadline, I asked Marcus if we could meet to discuss the buyout. He seemed pleased, probably thinking I was about to accept his terms. We met at a coffee shop near our office, and Marcus was relaxed and friendly, playing the role of the supportive friend helping his grieving partner through a difficult transition. "So, have you thought about my offer?" he asked. "I have," I said. "And I want to show you something before I give you my answer." I pulled out a folder containing the summary of everything Jennifer and I had compiled over the past month. This is documentation showing that I brought in 32 of our 40 clients, representing 75% of our revenue, I said, sliding papers across the table. This is evidence that I personally created all of our core service methodologies and intellectual property. This is a compilation of recent client communications where multiple clients specifically said they work with Apex because of my creative direction and strategy. And this, I pulled out the final document, is a formal counteroffer for you to sell me your 50% stake for $300,000, which is actually generous considering I could argue the company is worthless without me. Marcus's face went from confident to shocked to angry in about 5 seconds. "What the fuck is this?" he asked, his voice rising. You can't just claim all the clients are yours, we built this together. I stayed calm. The evidence shows otherwise, Marcus. You handled operations and sales, which is valuable but replaceable. I handled creative, strategy, and client relationships, which is what actually generates revenue. If you force your buyout at 250, I'll leave, take most of the clients with me and start my own agency. You'll be left with a company that can't deliver services because you don't have the creative expertise, and you'll lose most of the revenue within 6 months. You can't just steal our clients, Marcus said, but he sounded less certain now. I'm not stealing anyone, I replied. I'm offering them the choice to continue working with me at my new agency or stay with you at Apex. But based on my conversations with them over the past 3 weeks, most of them will choose to follow me because they work with us for my creative work, not for your operations management. So you have a choice. Sell me your stake for $300,000, which lets you exit with money and move on, or I'll accept your $250 offer, leave, take the clients, and you'll end up with nothing. Marcus tried to argue, tried to threaten legal action, tried to claim I was violating our partnership agreement or competing unfairly. But Jennifer had made sure everything I was doing was legal. I hadn't solicited clients while still a partner, I hadn't violated any non-compete terms, and I had the right to start a new business after I was bought out. After about 30 minutes of back and forth, Marcus realized he was cornered. If he forced his buyout, he'd lose the company. If he took my counteroffer, he'd at least walk away with $300,000. I need time to think about this, Marcus finally said. You gave me 30 days, I replied. I'm giving you 48 hours. If I don't hear from you by December 7th, I'm accepting your original offer of $250, leaving the company, and launching Davidson Creative Group the next day. Your choice. I left the coffee shop, leaving Marcus sitting there with my counteroffer and the documentation showing he'd been outmaneuvered at his own game. Marcus called me on December 7th, the deadline. I'll accept your offer, he said, his voice tight with anger. $300,000 for my 50%, but I want this done fast. We closed the deal within 2 weeks, with Jennifer handling all the legal paperwork. Marcus signed over his stake in Apex Digital Marketing for $300,000, which was still a lowball price but more than he deserved considering he tried to steal the company from me at my father's funeral. The official transfer happened on December 20th, and Marcus was completely out of the business. The moment Marcus was legally separated from the company, I renamed it Davidson Creative Group anyway. The company I'd already set up as a backup plan became the new main company, and I transitioned all the clients to the new entity with new branding and new positioning. It was essentially the same service with the same team, just without Marcus and with me as the sole owner. Not a single client left during the transition. In fact, several clients told me they were relieved that Marcus was gone because they'd found him difficult to work with. Within 2 months of buying out Marcus, I hired a new operations manager who was significantly better at the job than Marcus had been, and I brought in a business development person to handle the sales side. The company actually ran more smoothly without Marcus because I could make decisions quickly without partnership conflict, and the team morale improved because they didn't have to deal with his management style anymore. By February 2025, 3 months after buying Marcus out, the company was doing better revenue than it had ever done with both of us as partners. Here's the beautiful irony of the whole situation. Marcus tried to exploit my grief and vulnerability to steal a multi-million-dollar company from me for $250,000. Instead, his betrayal at my father's funeral motivated me to spend 30 days building an airtight case against him, and I ended up buying him out for $300,000, which was still way below what his stake was actually worth. He thought he was being clever timing his ambush for my weakest moment, but he forgot that weak moments can also create the strongest motivation for revenge. The last I heard about Marcus, he tried to start his own digital marketing agency and failed within 6 months because he didn't have the creative skills or client relationships to make it work. Several of his former contacts reached out to me asking if I was hiring, which I found satisfying. He destroyed his reputation in the industry, lost the company he tried to steal, and ended up with less money than he would have made if he'd just been a decent partner and let the business continue growing with both of us. As for me, I'm now 34 years old, sole owner of a successful agency doing $3 million in revenue this year, and I have complete control over my professional future. I miss my dad every day, but I'm grateful that he taught me to protect myself in business and that his last lessons to me ended up being exactly what I needed to survive Marcus's betrayal. My dad always said the best revenge in business is winning, not just beating the person who wronged you but actually building something better without them. If you're in a business partnership and you're reading this, here's my advice. Document everything, know your value, build relationships directly with clients, and never assume your partner won't betray you just because you're friends. Business and friendship are different things, and when money is involved, people will show you who they really are. Make sure you're prepared for that moment before it happens, because by the time someone hands you buyout papers at your father's funeral, it's almost too late to protect yourself. Subscribe to Man's Diary for more real stories about business betrayals and strategic revenge. Drop a comment telling me if you think I went too far or if this was justified. And remember, the person who tries to exploit your weakest moment is often the person who ends up learning how strong you really are.